My name is Trey Reckling. I'm with the Academy of Cannabis Science, and we're here today for a live chat with Juddy Rosellison. Juddy is the co-owner and professional grower at Trailblazing Productions in Bellingham, Washington. And Juddy, good morning. How you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Trey.
Good to see you, man. And just a little bit of, he might not promote himself. Juddy's a humble guy, but he's been growing for years. He not only grown for years, but was one of the first licenses to be approved, I believe, in Washington State. One of the first brands to be able to establish themselves,
Yep.
and that's a tough thing, at the beginning, especially when there aren't always rules for all the things that there will one day be rules for, or that those rules are changing. Juddy and Trailblazer are also one of only 3 companies in the state who are approved to produce cannabis specifically for patients. And so we're really glad to have him on his faculty. And Juddy, just welcome back. Good to see you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be here. Yeah, like Trey said, we were one of the first to get licensed. There was a bunch of hurdles we had to go through till we could actually get growing, but perseverance allowed us to get to that point. When we made the switch, we also decided to be a 100% LED grow light facility at a time when most people didn't think you could even grow cannabis with LEDs. And we kind of proved that you can. And yeah, we've got a really environmental carbon footprint focus that we try and adhere to here. We've got water reclamation systems. We recycle everything we can, upcycle everything we can, try and keep as much out of a landfill as we can, and produce medical grade cannabis that's abides by the Washington State Department of Health guidelines to be termed medical grade.
And so for those of you in Nevada, in our state, what it means is that Juddy's cannabis goes through additional testing steps that aren't required of everybody else. So pesticide testing for heavy metals, which is a big, expensive machine, but really, going the extra mile to make sure that people who are putting this into their body, especially for medicine, can be assured that it's clean inputs, it's good stuff. And so we hope that the standard will one day be this across the board. But for now, especially are grateful to folks like you for taking the time and expense and I know heartache sometimes just to go through the bureaucracy to do it. So thank you very much.
Yep, it's not always easy, but it's the right thing usually isn't.
So and some people think, hey, well, this is what I want to do for a career. I want to grow cannabis. I think I'll go get a job as a master gardener. Help people understand how many years you put in, just for reference. I know you didn't just start a licensed grow because you wanted to grow cannabis.
No, I was in the medical market for about 4 years before 502 passed, and had been enthusiast for most of my life. So it's just kind of the natural progression of going through the medical, and then I didn't really like the way the I-502 rules were written, but I knew the only way to make them, basically change to something that I thought would be acceptable would be to be a part of the machine. And so we jumped on board anyway.
And I know today we said we would talk about setting up the home grow, like the parameters for getting started, getting your tent set up. And so for those of you in Nevada, you all have, if you're over 21, you've got the right to home grow. And so if you're not doing that, you might want to consider it. I know if you live in an apartment, you might have the right to do it, but the landlord says you can't, or if you're renting, otherwise, landlord might have something to say. But if you're in a place where you can do this, it makes cannabis consumption possibly more cost effective for you. You get to know the plant. You start to bond a little bit better and start to appreciate, I think, what it is, how well it is that people like Juddy do their work. I don't think you'll stop buying retail cannabis probably, but you'll have a lot more to say about it.
For sure.
So Juddy, where would we get started? Let's assume you know, I come to you and I say, look, I've just never grown this. I've grown some tomatoes in the back porch. Where do I even get started?
That's a big question, Trey, because the biggest factor to always keep in mind is what are the parameters that you have to grow within? Do you have a bunch of private property in the backyard? Do you have a small backyard? Do you have any backyard? Basement space, closet space? And so there really is no one right way of kind of like a setup, because it really all just kind of depends on the space that you have available to you and then making that space work. I'm not sure where, you know, we could probably kind of tailor this conversation to the folks that we have here and kind of what their personal situations are,
Well,
rather than kind of try and cover everything.
Let me ask you this: what are some basics we're going to have? So you mentioned a closet, a basement. There will be some resources we're going to have handy, right?
Absolutely.
So like
Yeah.
electrical and could you talk about like some of the basics? So as we're scoping out a place in the house, what are some things that you're looking for?
Right. First question, could you fill me in on what the home grow laws are in Nevada? How many plants, or is it square footage, or kind of what those parameters are?
Yo, I believe, and we're not teaching people typically in Nevada on home grow because that's not one of the classes that UNLV picked up. But I believe is it 4 per adult? Do you all know? I'll look up while we're talking to confirm.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll look up and confirm. But
Yeah.
generally, it's going to be a small. Most states are 4 to 6.
Okay, perfect. Well, in that situation, then it's again, are you going to be indoors or outdoors? And that's going to kind of depict on kind of the style that you're going to go with. I don't know what, you know, I'd imagine you could probably grow outdoors in Nevada year round. But most people are going to be indoors because they want to keep it kind of on the down low. And most people the easiest way to get started is to get a grow tent, which is usually a 4 foot by 4 foot square foot footprint. They're 5 to 6 feet tall, and they've got a little internal frame that's going to hold lights and fans and stuff like that, and it's got a tarp type base that will help try and keep little leaks and, you know, water from damaging the floor. If possible, you'd want it to be on a concrete floor or something above, so you know you're not going to be damaging any kind of carpet or flooring. If you do have a big leak somehow, they're kind of the first factor of indoor gardening is you're going to flood to some degree at some point. The first 3 rules of indoor gardening is never leave a faucet running, never leave a faucet running, and never leave a faucet running. And so you really want to just make sure that you're not going to damage any part of the infrastructure, especially if you're, you know, renting or in an apartment. You know, make sure you've got a containment source. So, you know, if water does leak, because water inevitably will leak, to be able to contain that. And then it's really just about setting up your little micro environment. You are creating the light and the temperature and the humidity, and you're going to be giving it nutrients. So yeah, it's just kind of getting your space set up and then acquiring your gear from there.
I did want to clarify, I checked Nevada law, and you got to live 25 miles away from a dispensary. So that's great for people who live a long way from a dispensary, but that's what they did to protect retailers. And you can only have 6 per house, maximum of 12, depending on how many adults are in the house. But above 12 is a felony. So it's more than just being 21. So I misspoke on that. So I want to clarify before Anybody go
Unless
buy
you
seeds?
were inducted into the 2014 medical grow,
Mhm.
then you're allowed to still grow within 18 or 25 miles within a dispensary.
Excellent. So you are grandfathered in. Excellent. Thank you on that, Jen. Thanks for the clarification. So do explore. We, like I said, we always encourage, if you have the legal right to grow, there is a pathway, and it's a great space to learn in. So so you might want to consider. So Juddy, I've picked out a place in my home. I've got a tent, and like we said, a tent is very much like a tent, like that you would go camping with, but
Yeah, it looks like a big refrigerator. It's big,
yeah,
rectangular tent. It's usually got some hollow tubing inside that you put together as a framework. Pretty basic, a big zipper opening. And so you got your spot. The next concern is going to be how much power you've got. Historically, indoor growers would need 220 volt power, which is the big power for like your oven and range, or your dryer for your clothes dryer. But with LEDs these days, they're far more efficient, and you don't need such big power, which makes it a lot more convenient than trying to get that kind of power to where your light fixture is going to be. And so that also comes, LEDs come with a cost. They are, with the efficiency and the longevity, they are more expensive than the high pressure sodium or high intensity discharge lights that have been used historically. But they also last longer, and they cost you less to run. And so after depending on how much it's on, I think the return on investment is about 3 years. You'll save as much in power as you would have used in a high intensity discharge fixture for those 3 years. And they usually last between 5 and 10 years. And I think most warranties are like a 5-year warranty, and then their expected lifetime is about 10 years. And so you can continue to save.
Yeah, we grow with LEDs at home, and I'll tell you, we living in Seattle, apartments are small, or at least ours was. And so we were growing for 2 years on our apartment with high intensity, with HID lights, which are hot, like you said. We didn't have to turn on the heat in the apartment. It kept the whole apartment warm enough that we didn't have a heating bill. So that was an interesting exchange. But then when we went to LEDs, we're like, oh, I couldn't believe how much better we could control the temperature inside the tent. Because that's another thing. Could you talk a little bit about light and the temperature you want to keep inside that environment? The advantage of a tent is you can kind of have a microclimate, once you set it up.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the idea, is to have a little micro environment. And one of the things to also consider with the old high intensity discharge lights, they are hot, and there's a lot of infrared heat that comes off of those. And so it's going to require you to also have air conditioning in that thing, a small air conditioner, which is more energy that you're going to be using. Oftentimes, with using LEDs, you can just use passive air fans. You don't actually need to have air conditioning. But if you can have, kind of fresh air coming in one side of the tent and the hot air getting blown out the other side of the tent, you can maintain the temperature that you want in that tent at about 80 degrees. When you're using LED lights, there's something that all gardeners need to be aware of is vapor pressure deficit. And we're not going to go too deep into that. It's more of a higher level concept, but you want to have, oh, there you go, Trey.
Thanks.
No, that's Jen. Jen's got a tent going there. Perfect.
Jen, nice setup. Thanks. Could you show your plants again there real quick, in case somebody missed? Thanks. Looking good. Got it set up. And yeah, that looks nice. Jen, are you using LEDs or HID lights?
LEDs.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for
Fantastic.
that live example.
Yeah, so you're going to want to have, with your LEDs, you're going to need some environmental controls with regards to a timer to turn the light on and off at specific times. And there's various other kind of controls that will turn a fan on if it gets above a certain temperature in there, or it would turn the air conditioner on if it gets above a certain temperature in there. Other factors would turn on a dehumidifier if the humidity gets too high in there. But in a simple home tent like that, with an LED light, those and passive air, you can really kind of keep that environment within a reasonable range really easily.
And as you're just getting started, I know Juddy keeps mentioning little different elements, air conditioner, a fan, and there are some basics that you could probably get by on, and you might not even have to buy everything new. So keeping an eye on Facebook pages, on even Buy Nothing. I gave away my HID light on a Buy Nothing Facebook page. And so keeping an eye on stuff like that. Keep in mind, if you get any used equipment, it needs to be cleaned very thoroughly, because you don't want to inherit somebody else's powdery mildew or any kind of spider mites, any kind of
pests.
And it will, you'll transmit a disease just that quickly. So just be sure that if you get some hand-me-downs, that's fine, and it'll give you a quicker start. Just disinfect thoroughly so that you have a clean start and you don't have any of those problems. Juddy, talk to us a little bit more about a fan, because a fan is one of those essentials. I'll tell you, the first crop I ever had, I had somebody helping me, kind of my weed tutor, and I told him, I said, hey, I've been turning off my fan at night so they can rest. And he's like, no, you turn off your lights, but you never turn off your fans. Could you talk to us a little bit more? I know you're keeping airflow, but also you're reducing other opportunity for problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, plants basically breathe through the entire part of their leaf system. And so you always want to make sure that the air is moving around, and so it's not getting stagnant around the plant, first and foremost. And then there's one concern you want to have with your fans is that they're not on too high, because you can get wind burn. Just like you can get like wind chapped lips, or like wind chapped skin. It gets too dry and you can really kind of damage the plants that way. But you want to have enough wind, because that's kind of the one thing that's going to make them strong. If something's always kind of pushing on them, they're going to always want to kind of come back to their neutral spot. And so you're going to have a much stronger, vigorous plant if you've got kind of a constant wind. We use fans on oscillating. So it kind of hits these plants over there, and then I'll hit those plants over there. And so they kind of get a little break every once in a while, but it's always kind of on them. But you always want to make sure it's not just blowing on one plant and basically drying it out. So yeah, you want to make sure and that's going to also make sure that you're circulating the CO2 that's in the atmosphere, so that they can pull that in and do their thing with that.
And I know we're breezing through some of this, you all, so bear with us. When we teach this class, it's a 10-hour class, and there's a lot more details. So and I'm going to open the floor for questions just in a minute. But so we talked about the structure, the tent. In this case, if you're inside, we talked about fans as being a necessity. We talked very briefly about lights. Could you talk to us about smell? Because I know that's something people want to guard against. I like the smell personally. Might be a little too much for some folks, but how do you, what's a good way for us to start thinking about mitigating the odors?
Yeah, one of the best ways is to use a charcoal filter with a little fan that sits on top of it. It's a little cylindrical, or sometimes a big cylinder that's full of activated charcoal. And that really has a really good effect on scrubbing the smell out of the air. And so just having that nearby your tent, you don't necessarily have to have it in there, will help immensely. I've never used any kind of a aromatic like diffuser near it, but I think that could get onto the plant and cause it to taste and act in kind of a toxic way of like not quite a pesticide, but have some toxicity get onto the plant. So I wouldn't recommend any kind of really smelly things to kind of out smell the smell. So charcoal filters are probably the best, easiest way to do that.
Okay. And we didn't talk about the life cycle of the plant. We'll do that at a later date, but like you mentioned, having a timer is important, because otherwise you're going to be babysitting a lot to say, oh gosh, it's 10 o'clock, I got to turn the lights on, because when you first start, the plants will be at about 18-hour light cycle. Then when you want to start flower, you're going to kind of back to a 12-hour light cycle. So you can imagine how much off and on that is. I'm in the process of switching out a timer that went bad, and that's where I am right now. Is I just got to go in there and program my timer, because last few days I've been babysitting and setting my timers, and you don't want to have to do that. You do want to keep a close eye on them frequently,
sure.
Just to because things. Could you talk about that? Just being in touch. I think some people want to do it like set it and forget it, and like say, well, the plants will grow, I'll leave them alone, I'll come back and check them in a few days. Could you talk about the things that could happen when you don't check in for a few days?
Yeah, absolutely. That the thing with kind of automating all of your environmental controls is they're all subject to failure, and it's one of those things where you've got to find the right balance of you're going to get out what you put into it. So the more you're in with the plants and observing and caretaking, the better off the product in the end is going to be. But there's also that, you don't want to pet all the fur off of your new bunny and just like pet it to death. And one of the biggest things that a lot of people will do is try and peek at their plants when the lights are off. And that is probably the worst thing you can do, because it can turn your plants into hermaphrodites, and you'll get pollen and seeds and kind of ruin the whole thing. And so as much as you might want to go check on them, when the light's on, and, kind of just build a regiment of a certain time of day or a couple of times of day, in the morning and the evening, just kind of make sure everything's still working. It's probably a good hybrid of, putting a good amount of time in, but not too much.
No, that's a good point, because especially as a new pot parent or new cannabis parent, boy, it's so exciting. It's really magical, and I hope that no matter how many years you might grow, you don't lose that. But overtending can be a problem, and like some people have cautioned me early years, and still to this day, they're like, let it grow. The plant knows what it wants to do. Just allow the plant to be the plant. Don't worry about going out and buying a $60 jug of terp control blast or whatever they want to sell you. Keep it simple. The fewer elements too that you got going in, the fewer you have to figure out if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
So if you're adding a bunch of different nutrients, and it might be hard to zero in and say, hey, why did that affect my plant the way it did? So anyway, keep it simple is the point there. But do check in on them, because things do change overnight. You get powdery mildew, you get like you said, spider mites, and the quality and the health of your plants can turn pretty suddenly.
Yeah, you can lose the whole thing. Yeah, and it is, we here, even on a commercial level, every morning when the lights come on, gardener goes through and just checks all the environmental controls. Where is the temperature? Where is the humidity? Are the lights on? Or any lights not on? And then again, every day at the end of the day, they go through and look, say goodnight to all the girls, and make sure everything is still looking right and all the parameters are in range. And things do go crazy. Like, you know, I say don't look at night. You know, just within this last, gosh, probably 5-6 months ago, the gardener was like, yeah, these plants right here are looking really funny in the middle of a flower cycle. And we're like, well, let's keep an eye on them. So a week later, 2 weeks later, we're like, man, they really do look funny. And so fortunately, we have cameras in every square foot of this facility, including in the grow rooms. And I was able to go back and look at one of the cameras in the middle of the night, and one outlet was not turning the lights off at night. So when all the lights are supposed to be off and you're not supposed to go in there, you're not supposed to have light. Yeah, and I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 20 outlets all on, you know, one timer. And I still don't know why, but that one wasn't turning off. So we'd have to go and unplug it at the end of the day, plug it in the beginning of the day until the electrician can come out and try and troubleshoot and figure it out. But yeah, so there's, you know, you lose a pump if you've got an auto pumping timer system and your pump dies, your plants don't get water every 4 hours like they're supposed to. You get, you know, your air conditioner gets stuck on, gets stuck off. You know, there's the more complicated you make it, the better your end product can be, but there's also more to go wrong along the way. So it's tough as a startup grower because you're so excited and you just want to kind of get to the finish line. And it takes about 3 months to get your first harvest down. Then, you know, you start again, and, you know, it's a year before you even get like your 4 tries in. It takes a year. And so just have patience and go slow with it, because yeah, the more things you add, the more things can go wrong.
And you're going to kill a few plants. That's okay.
Oh yeah.
We're not talking about pets, right? So we don't want to kill plants, but it can happen. And so, but let it go, learn from it, try not to kill the next one. But you're going to mess up some. But I will say on the economic side of it, the first time I grew, and this was using a tent, I think I told you, Juddy, I spent about $300. So between the tent, the light, the fan, soil, everything. Yeah, so I got in for about $300, I think. Maybe 500 when you include some other stuff. But I ended up paying for it times 2.5, maybe 3 in the value of harvested ounces or grams, ounces. When you set that up against what it would cost me to buy that amount in retail. I'm a patient, so I get to grow in Washington. And so, but it certainly paid for itself. You know, I still buy trailblazing cannabis, but, you know, anyway, so want to open the floor to your questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'm going to keep peppering Juddy with some questions, but what questions do you all have? I know we flew through a lot of information, and good to see you, Victor. Victor joined us. Victor Calderon there is also AKA the Cannabis Pastor. Victor has a history as a pastor. He's also the translator and faculty member for our Spanish language class, the Cannabis Professional, that we teach both at Seattle Central and UNLV. Good to have you, Vic.
Great to be here, brother.
You guys have any questions? Oh yeah, Goose. You're muted there, buddy.
Okay, sorry about that. So as a bud tender, I have to try a lot of different strains, like a lot of different flower strains. And I'm kind of new. I'm about 1.5 years into it, and I recently came across a black cherry punch that just blew me out of the water as far as what it does to my body, what it does to my brain, and just have a curiosity. Is that a fairly new strain right now, and is it gaining momentum, hopefully?
I don't know. I would imagine it's a fairly new strain just by the name of it. And I can tell you that the biggest factor for you to be aware of is it's the terpenes that are in the strain. Kind of doesn't really matter what the name is, it's the terpene profile that really like sings your song. And so you know, years ago we were trying to explain all this to bud tenders and the public, and we would have purchase raw terpenes from True Terpenes, and we would have them in little vials with like cotton balls or something in them, and let people smell them. And they were just like, what are you selling? What is this? Or we're not selling anything. We're just educating people. And, you know, person A would come in and we would, you know, say, let them smell a certain terpene and they would be repulsed by it and say, so our strain of this has this terpene in it. You shouldn't buy this one. And we kind of go through the various terpenes and they'd be like, oh, this is the one. And we're like, okay, well, our strain, this has that in it. You should go try that one, and you should try all strains that have that terpene in it. And some people would, one person would love the smell of a certain terpene, and the next person would be repulsed by it. And so that's what you should try and figure out, is what is the terpene profile of that strain. And you should try and find other strains from all producers that are that terpene profile-ish, because that's going to butter your bread.
Yeah, and then like Dingus says in comments, the nose knows, and that's, you know, that's really the thinking of, at least among a lot of patients and some clinicians who say, you know, our brain knows more than we do. It's hard to describe a smell, but kind of knowing what hits your zone, whether it's more linalool, the lavender kind of smell, beta caryophyllene, which is like that spicy clove pepper smell. Is it a myrcene, which is more like what you find in mangoes, alpha pinene, your pine needle kind of smell,
Citrines,
citrine, yeah.
gases.
So think about those foods that you like, or those smells that just bring you good peace of mind. And start, if you don't already shop for cannabis this way, this is what we recommend to people, is start looking for those things. Flip the bag over and see what's the terpene content, or terpenoid content they might call it. Because like Juddy says, if you shop for terpenes and then also pay attention to your cannabinoid profile, what's the ratio of CBD to THC, you'll probably be a lot better zoned in, because like we found, the names can just be names. You know, when Seattle went to the Super Bowl a few years back, all of a sudden, a lot of people were selling Marshawn Lynch OG, but people didn't plan on selling it. The name just popped up. It was probably some other. So I would trust the labs over the names when you can. And then also, I'm putting it in the chat. This is if you want to dive into the lineage of any strain that you found or cultivar that you really like. So Goose, you can take that black cherry soda. Was it black cherry soda?
No, it's a black cherry punch, which is, it's like, I've had black cherry sodas before.
Yeah.
And the black cherry punch is, I know it's got purple punch in it, and then I think the I think it's black cherry pie and purple punch. And so my personal thing is, like, nearly everything for my own things, nearly everything with purple punch crossed kind of hits me well, until I get into the lemons, or, you know, the limonene. You know, there's certain areas that I don't like going, or certain sativas that they mix with that I don't like it. But this particular black cherry punch, I've been talking to fellow bud tenders about it. I've been talking to a lot of people, because it's just like, for my own personal taste, it's so damn delicious. You open up a jar, it smells incredible. But the biggest thing is, I used to smoke a lot of high quality cigars.
Mm-hmm.
And the smoke that comes out of this has such a richness that it brings me into like a good Cuban cigar where you could taste the soils, you could taste everything about them. And it's just, so the strain right now is an amazing strain to me that I just want more of. I want to find more cultivars that are growing it, hopefully.
No, that's great. And so, you know, you can tell your year and a half experience working retail, you're developing your nose, you're developing your language, you're understanding what works for you, in which in turn, you know, translates to being able to help consumers, hopefully. Because it's, you know, some of us would love to try everything in the store, but who's got the time and the money to do that? And so it's really critical that your retail employees know what's up. If y'all are shopping at a retail store and your bud tender doesn't have time or the knowledge to educate you on things like this, shop somewhere else, please.
And it's tricky, Goose, because this is the best thing since sliced bread for you right now. You want everybody to have that experience, but not everybody's going to, because their terpene desires aren't the same as yours. And kind of a simpler way to, you know, kind of cross reference it with something that people may be more familiar with is a simple concept of beers. Some people want an ale. Some people want a stout. Some people want a super hoppy IPA. And if you give that person that wants an ale an IPA, you'll ruin beer for them, you know? So and that's the tricky thing, is that's where we will get to at some point. People come in, they go, yeah, I want a red, or I want a IPA, or whatever it is. And that's kind of what they get. And so someday we'll get to that point where people are able to categorize this, and Leafly had started to do something like that, to be able to categorize it in a way that people can know what they wanted when they went in, because you might love IPAs. IPAs are the end of the world, but you give that person that comes in that just wants something mellow, they don't like you as a bud tender anymore. You don't know what you're doing because you sold them some gnarly, you know? So it's try and like tiptoe into these things as your customers are coming in, like, you know, what have you liked before? And it's going to really require a lot of you to kind of dive into these terpene profiles and kind of know what's what, and then be able to like accurately suggest something that you really think that they're going to like based on what they've told you. It's not what you like.
Right, correct. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. And I want to point out, I put the link for Philos Galaxy in the chat, but let me just show you all real quickly. My computer is not gonna, if y'all can see that, my computer, because I'm running Zoom, is not doing what this site usually does, which is like slowly rotate this galaxy of strains. This is, or cultivars. This is over, I think he's 1,200 to 2,000. I forget how many cultivars he's got now, but you can enter up here in the search a cultivar that you like, or you can pick one just randomly and say, okay, well, if I like this one, if I like this, here, that one's hard to read. So if I like this, Court Collar's Cough, I know these are the other cultivars that it gave birth to, or that's what it's related to. So once you start identifying, hey, I really like this terpene profile, and like Goose or anybody else could go up here in the right hand and corner and put in the name. Now this is based on science. This is based on lab data results. A guy in Oregon.
Basically the DNA of the plants, not the names. And that was one of the things that they wanted to do is this GG4 or is this Blue Dream really Blue Dream? And there's a lot of people calling stuff Blue Dream that wasn't, but people were buying it because they thought it was. This Philos Galaxy, fair warning, you will get sucked into this thing and lose time.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, and you'll also see what clone group and where they got the supplies. So not every strawberry sour diesel is the same, you know. And like Trainwreck, people who are real into cultivars, they'll argue, well, that's not the real Trainwreck. The real Trainwreck came from here because of this, this story. It was from this one cut, meaning one clone cut that then was dispersed. People get super nerdy over this stuff, and and I don't mean to hate on them anyway, but they get super into this. So if you're one of the people like this, Stardog, look at the influence Stardog has had on the genetics of cannabis. And this is thanks to people like DJ Short and other home growers, especially in the 80s and 90s when this was underground. They were growing in closets. A lot of people really crossing and breeding for high THC. So as a result, what we see on the stores shelves now is predominantly high THC cannabis, but we know in nature, it was closer to a 1-to-1 balance or 1-to-1 ratio of about as much CBD as THC, or a lot closer. So even there, you might want to explore some of the rarities in a cannabis store. I know Juddy and Trailblazing sell a Harlequin, which, some people think, well, I don't want to smoke something with such low THC. I'll never get high, but you might be surprised. And some people also like to have, on a Saturday or whatever day, something they can consume all day long and still be clear and fresh and be able to get their stuff done. So if you're a patient, that's important. So just wanted to point that out. That's gave you the link, and but that's something to check out. You might want to spend a little time with. We have any other questions from the group?
I was gonna ask, but I feel like you guys basically answered, but just to kind of confirm. So my question was just like strains and what the dispensaries tell you you're buying, if it really is the same. I know you're getting it from different brands at that point. So I didn't know if the brands had to go through like a certain law system, or like, if they really couldn't advertise a strain to be a strain unless it had, the requirements that strain has to have or something. Or if they just name it whatever they name it. So if you could clarify that, that'd be kind of cool.
Juddy?
Yeah, in Washington at least, there is no making sure that it is what it is. And the only way to do that would be to, put it up against the Philos, send it into Philos and see if it actually genetically matches what it says in that Philos database.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's really not. And there's a lot of folks that have taken strains, and I mean, there's no doubt that different names are going to have a more or less success rate of sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of strains out there that are they're basically different names for the same strain, and I can attest to that with Cinex and Cotton Candy Kush. Same thing, exact same thing, based on terpene and cannabinoid profile.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's just crazy to think about that. Like, we don't really know, like what I don't know. It's just crazy, but it is the startup of everything too. So we'll see.
For sure, and that was something that was initially the intent of that Philos database was for people to basically submit their products so that it could be public knowledge, so that it couldn't be patented or copyrighted at some point. And this was the initial line that everybody was told was that, and it was supposed to be like this public thing so that our strains didn't get taken away by some company that wanted to, then owned that genetic marker of that strain.
Yeah.
And then the guy sold it to a huge pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, that the site comes with this huge disclaimer, and thanks for bringing that up, Juddy. He, perception-wise, he burned a lot of people. A lot of promises were made, and
the entire industry,
and the changed his tune. That now the information is still up and available to you all, and I think it's still valuable in that way. I wouldn't ask you to invest in the company, but yeah, there's a lot of weirdness in this industry. And speaking of, Andy, it was a great question, because other people in other sneaky ways or other sneaky things going on will buy seeds from a seed company and then grow them out and claim that it's their own. You know, I'll buy from Aficionado Seeds or some high-end seed company. I'll grow this plant and I'll change the name and I'll say, I bred this out. And so, or they'll cross to well-known genetics and call it their own and not give credit to the people who kind of brought the parents to the table. So it's really tough right now. And that's, I feel for farmers and am very, you know, that much more grateful for folks like Juddy, who I know keep it square when there's so much temptation and other ways you can do business. It's nice to know somebody who's keeping in the lines and producing, you know, good stuff. And so
Thanks, Trey.
no, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully there's more people like that in this industry too. I feel like this industry attracts, hopefully I'm hoping it attracts more of those type of people too. So hopefully we keep it for the people and everything, you know.
For sure. And we, you know, we would be remiss to ever miss an opportunity to say that it's also largely been we know how much the drug laws have affected people, especially communities of color. And so any community you're in where you have a voice where laws are being made, please make sure your legislators know about you and how you feel. It's been a land grab for licenses, and white people have really been at the front of the line, and it shouldn't be like that. A lot of times education and equity are conversations had after the fact. And those are two conversations we encourage lawmakers to have first. You know, how are we going to educate the public? How are we going to make sure that licenses are distributed equally and fairly? You know, if you're in Florida, you have to have millions of dollars in the bank and 10 years farming experience to even get in line for a license. It's vertically integrated, and there are only so many licenses in the state. So you have to have millions of dollars to even get in the game and put an application up. That's not the way it went down in Washington. So so the fairness issue is always on the table. So we encourage you all, while all this chatter is going on about how many billions of dollars the industry is worth, to pay attention to the real conversation. And that's, you know, about fairness of practice for licenses, and also remembering that people are in jail right now for doing the same thing on a much, much smaller scale. You know, a lot of nonviolent offenders in our jails. And so that's why we're partnered and working with Last Prisoner Project. So we ask you to pay attention to good groups like that. Last Prisoner Project is a group that says, hey, until the last cannabis prisoner is released, our job's not done. So they're doing some really cool stuff. So we always want to give them a shout out. And, there's one in the chat, Juddy. Seeds, good sites to follow. Do you have any seed company that you prefer?
I actually don't. You know, we had a small window when we were first getting licensed to bring in all of our genetics, and I brought in a bunch of genetics from Amsterdam at the time, and so I really have had no need to go searching through the seed purveyors recently. I have met DJ Short and purchased seeds from him personally, but I don't really have anything, anyone in particular.
I like Cincy Seeds, you know, and you'll get some seed banks. Neptune Seed Bank out of Oregon has a whole lot of brands. I just encourage you to read up on the reviews about their reliability. Seeds are a total faith buy. It's total trust, because a seed looks like a seed looks like a seed, and they're about $10 a pop for a seed. And then if they're not feminized, half of those are going to be males, which you're not going to want to grow. So
unless you want to breed.
Yeah, so potentially a seed could cost you $20. So always go, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So always go with a reputable dealer and somebody that you've read good reviews on online, not just on quality, but on the percentage of seeds that are actually sprouting. So,
and the last thing I want to throw in there to you guys, you know, especially to Andy, is you know, if you are really passionate about the plant, try and find an association that you can volunteer and be a part of, because it comes back to, you know, a lot of the laws that are opening up, they're not going to be perfect, and the best way to make change to try and make sense, because these people are making rules about something they have known nothing about. get involved and put some time in and try and make rules that make sense.
And thank you all for the additional, Jen put seeds ban in, Dingus said seeds here now, based in Pacific Northwest, Attitude Seed Bank. And then finally, I put in a link to the Cannabis Alliance. We encourage you all, whether you live in Washington or not, the Cannabis Alliance is a great professional organization that during COVID, all the meetings are free. This afternoon from 4 to 5, if you want to just jump on it's called Virtual Happy Hour. It's a consumption-friendly event, and it's hosted by the Cannabis Alliance. So today from 4 to 5, if you want to follow that link, you can come on, meet some other folks in Washington State. They're licensees and other professionals who are working in the space. So if some of you are looking for a job or looking to move up in the industry, it's nothing like it. And this group has always been open arms and really welcoming. So I'm on the board, so full disclosure. But only on the board because it's been such a positive experience for me. So we hope that you find the same. You can always reach me at Trey Reckling. That's treyreckling@gmail.com. So don't ever be shy about reaching out. We hope that you all have a good, positive experience in your classes. We hope that you'll come back and join us for more than one live chat too. And look for those Cannabis Alliance events, the good professional development. Thank you, Juddy.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you for having me, Trey.
Thank you all. When you join us again, we'll talk about, we got some videos and we've got some inside behind the scenes shots with one of Juddy's specialists in the clone room. And so we'll talk about cloning cannabis and taking care of the babies.
Woohoo. Cool. All right. Bye.
Thank y'all. Have a good one.